Greetings, my dear friends. Once again, I, Commander Chakrapani from Chak Simplifies, am back. I'm back this time in very quick succession with what is happening in the Gulf of Hormuz, in the war inside the Persian Gulf. And let's move on from here. With me, as was yesterday, my dear friend, Lieutenant General Kahlon. Kahlon, Manu, welcome.
Good evening, Chaks. Nice to be back. Events have overtaken us, as a matter of fact. Last 24 hours, the events have unfolded very, very rapidly, and that's why we decided that we need to come back again in quick succession.
Absolutely. And the most interesting thing, yesterday we were talking in some form that something has to happen.
Correct.
We were anticipating different things, but this one wasn't, I look at it as a masterpiece. I'll tell you why. A blockade of the Hormuz, so far it was Iran which was calling the shots. It had blockaded Hormuz, although it had no right to be doing so. The main channel of the Gulf of Hormuz does not pass through the Iranian territorial waters. It's in the international waters. Or it passes through the Omani waters. Therefore, Iran had no business. Then Iran came up and said, no, Iran, the Hormuz is free, but we have some technical issues. These were mines that they claimed to have placed, and those mines could damage, and therefore they said you have to route yourself via the northern passage, which is basically through the Iranian waters. With the Gulf of Hormuz not contested, Iran had its say. What has US done now? It has said there will be a blockade, and blockade, Manu, is an act of war. It can be for a short duration, it can be for a long duration, but it's an act of war. This blockade is very interesting. It applies only to ships that enter Iranian ports or are close to the Iranian coast. It does not apply to anyone who is going through the main passage.
Absolutely.
Second, it says it will be implemented with effect from 1400 hours today GMT, which is about 1930 hours as far as India time is concerned. And an interesting part is interdiction of ships which have paid toll. These ships can be commandeered, can be taken and exploited for their own means. How do you look at all this?
So it's interesting that both Iran and the US are, in their own ways, they have effected a blockade, right? And there are very many interesting aspects of this particular blockade. Today, before this program, when I was trying to actually gather the viewpoints of experts, naval experts from all over the world, everybody said, and it was quite surprising to really discern, that everybody says that this particular aspect of the US policy is doomed for failure even before it's unrolled. And time now is about 1940. 10 minutes back, actually, by the US timings, the blockade is in effect as we speak today.
Right.
So somebody described it beautifully. He said, in a way, this naval blockade by the US is, akin to cutting your own nose to spite the face, because it's going to have ramifications not only on the US but on the entire world economy. Why I say that was because just a couple of weeks back, the US administration, during military operations, had lifted sanctions on Iran for it to be able to actually
sell oil. Right.
Similarly, the Russian sanctions were actually diluted, and they gave them a waiver for 1 month to say you can sell oil, because they didn't want the world economy to be impacted. And here now, we have the same administration actually putting down the same naval blockade in place. So the oil supply to the world economy is going to be cut off, and it's going to have a huge, huge impact on the world economy, right? So there is, to my mind, in the American policy making circles, there seems to be a dilemma of some kind, and we could develop on this as we go along.
Absolutely. So let's try and understand what is actually happening behind the scenes. You spoke about the global economy being impacted, indeed. But then, we have had this war now for virtually 40 days, 40 plus. In these 40 days, a fair amount of logistics that was going out through the Gulf of Hormuz has already found its alternate paths. For example, the east-west pipeline, from which is the pipeline as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, has a capacity of 7 million barrels per day. Saudi's total export is 5.5 million barrels. So almost all of Saudi's exports are comfortably going to the Yanbu port, which is in the Red Sea, and moving on from there. Oman, UAE are sending it to Fujairah, and this is going out from Fujairah. That's about 2 million barrels going out there.
Absolutely.
About 1 million barrels are going out through the route of Syria to Kirkuk and thereafter out. So, mota moti, about 9.5 million barrels are out. The total export of oil from the Hormuz is 20 million barrels. The shortfall, which is 10 million barrels, is being made up from US increased production because of lifting of sanctions for Russia is concerned, from Venezuela, Brazil, Angola, you name it, they've all got into the act. So one part is looked after.
Can I just give you a different perspective?
Yeah.
Now, while your mathematics is bang on, now what has actually is going to happen? And here I'm doing a little bit of crystal gazing, based on our studies, is that the blockade of Hormuz is likely tomorrow to be followed by an unofficial blockade of the Red Sea by the Houthis under the Iranian influence. So you will find that all the calculations on which you were basing your prediction to say that the Red Sea side of the coastline will remain open, right? Everybody is failing, and that is where all the experts today are predicting that we will see some actions by the Houthis taking place, which will have an adverse impact on the movement of the crude oil through the Red Sea.
Absolutely correct. There is, without any doubts, I was coming to that in any case, because this is all premised on the fact that Houthis will continue to remain quiet, that they have been quiet so far. They have fired the one-odd missile, but not really got into the action.
And can I just add one more point, please? All of us need to understand very clearly that what is currently, happening is an existential threat to Iran.
Yes.
Right? So the entire regime and the entire country, right, is now fighting a battle for survival. Their back is against the wall. So they are not going to be pulling punches. Whereas when the US starts applying military pressure, it is going to have a adverse impact on the GCC economies and the world economy as such. And you will find that it will become very difficult for the policy makers in Washington to persist with this naval blockade for an extended period of time. So that is where the dilemma actually is.
Absolutely brilliant. Let me give some statistics as far as, again, the Iranian impact is concerned. In case the Gulf of Hormuz gets blocked, Iran suffers. 90% of all of $110 billion equivalent of Iranian export that happen through the Strait of Hormuz. 80% of that is oil. Which means, $56 billion equivalent of oil goes from just one source, the Khadak Island. Now look at the other way around. It costs Iran $275 million per day in exports, about $160 million per day in imports. Effectively $435 million, which translates to about 13 billion per month. Sizable amount. Now, just 2-3 things more. The last time Iran had its crisis, that was in January, it happened because of a currency collapse. 42,000 reals were equal to about $1. That was on 31st of December 2025. In Jan 26, this crashed to about 1.5 to 1.8 lakh reals to $1. That's how all the shopkeepers came on road and this became an issue. Today, the real price is $1.5 million, a million reals to $1. There has been a substantial currency collapse, right? If this happens even more, and if your exports get hit, which means you're laying the foundations of another currency collapse.
So I agree with you. The figures which you spoke are absolutely bang on correct, but they are average statistics over an annual period of time. Today, Iranians are in a war mode where they are fighting for survival.
Absolutely.
So certain aspects of the economy actually can be put aside, because when you are fighting for survival, economy is the last thing on your mind. It's very, very important, but at this particular point in time, the point which I'm trying to make is that the annual prediction for the Iranian economy is just a 1% growth of the GDP for the entire year in 2026, whereas it has been averaging about maybe 2 to 3% annually for the last about 4 to 5 years.
Right.
Imports have been hit. As a matter of fact, during this particular last 40-day confrontation, they say about 120 odd major vessels have passed through Strait of Hormuz, out of which 23 have been very large crude carriers, and the Iranians have been charging them about $2 million per carrier. They have been extorting money.
Yeah.
So that is one of the reasons why today the Americans are saying that no ship which is going to be touching or emanating from an Iranian port will be allowed to go through. The Wall Street Journal has come up to say, they came up with an alternative, and they said instead of blockading, you could also go in for a milder form of quarantining. That means all vessels which are emanating from Iranian ports carrying oil should be quarantined by the US Navy, right, for a period of time, thus denying the Iranians the actual income which is happening from these, and not resort to a naval blockade, because it will become very, very difficult and it will impact a lot of other countries. So today what's happening is, because no European nation has come on board, neither have the GCC countries come on board, and so for the Navy to be managing the number of vessels, how do you actually, you being a naval hand and a very experienced naval hand, could you just explain to us as to how does such a kind of a blockade actually get impacted on the ground, or how is it to be effected on the ground? Because the US Navy is maintaining a standoff distance from the Strait of Hormuz, right? So the mechanics and the details of this need to be worked out.
Absolutely. The trouble with, see, the advantage of announcing a blockade is you have said there is a threat. The threat may or may not be implemented, but the threat is there. It's exactly what the Iranians have done. They've said there is a threat. They have hit a few ships, I won't deny that, but there have been no mines which have been the reason for a casualty. Now comes the fact that in case the US says all its ships going to Iran are getting blockaded and we will not let them go, or any ship that pays the extortion fees, the hafta, the wasuli, whatever you want to call it, will now be commandeered by us. What are you doing? You are ensuring two things. One, the Iranian Black Fleet, which almost occupies 75-80% of all oil exports from Iran, happens with the Black Fleet. That Black Fleet will get even more hit because ships will start getting caught more and more. Second, insurance. Any other nation which is sending its ship there, especially when Iran has to import, he has to get ships from other places. That nation will think twice because the cost will be phenomenally high. That is where the blockade will help. Yeah, you were saying something.
Well, I was saying that's exactly the point which the Iranians are saying, that this is muddled policy implementation by the US, because the same US was giving them, or lifting sanctions of them, giving them permission to actually export oil, and today now they are doing exactly the reverse, right? So what has changed? And the other point which came across, because I would like to reiterate this point of this fight for survival of Iran. Even the Islamabad talks which failed yesterday morning, the talks were called for by the US and not by the Iranians. The Iranians didn't demand talks. As a matter of fact, the US offered talks after threatening them to wipe them off the face of the world.
Absolutely. Right? Bomb them to Stone Age.
Absolutely. So, during an active conflict, who actually offers, and takes the first step of saying that we need to talk? It is the country which is actually losing.
Absolutely correct.
So now what is happening here is that despite the brilliant military victories which the Americans and the Israelis have scored, and they have caused a very, very great impact on the fighting or war fighting capability of certain elements of the Iranians, especially the Navy, in terms of the Iranian Air Force also getting hit. It has happened. But a very large fighting component of the IRGC and the Iranian armed forces still remains intact.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct.
So now to say that the Americans, yesterday, it was interesting to note that as the talks were in progress, the US President was declaring the victory of the Americans at various places to say that we have won the war. Right? At one level, you are proclaiming to your native audience that we have won the war. On the other side, you want to actually be the one to start negotiations with an adversary who is under tremendous pressure, economic and military, both.
Absolutely correct.
So now it's very interesting that how, because naval blockades work, but naval blockades need time to time.
Absolutely
need
correct.
time, and this time is the adversity is being faced not only by Iran, it is being faced by the entire world. As we speak today, when moment this naval blockade was announced, stock markets all over the world crashed.
Yeah.
Even the Indian stock market, I think, went down by 1%. Right? So across Europe, the percentage of about 1 to 1.5% stock markets were impacted adversely. In any case, now with the oil price having gone beyond $100, it's ranging between $103 to $105 per barrel as we speak. This is impacting a large number of countries.
Undoubtedly,
right? So even a country, will come to the Indian, the specific impact on India, how it is happening a little later. But there are major issues involved, and so each country, through its back channel, will be reaching out to the US administration to say, sir, you are intending to screw the Iranians, but it is we, who your allies, your partners, strategic partners, are getting screwed. The Europeans will cry aloud, the Asians will cry aloud, including the Indians, right, to say that we are now in a very difficult situation.
Undoubtedly correct. See, you are totally correct when you say a blockade needs time. It does. Right. What I believe the US is counting on is the fact that, see, there was a wartime situation. You had the superannuate goal, and they said, okay, this goal, the Iranian people came together. They are fighting for the flag, they are fighting for the country, they are fighting for survival.
Correct.
No doubts on that.
Correct.
As far as Iran is concerned, it is an existential crisis.
Correct.
However, the Iranian central leadership, if you will, today is the IRGC. The president is virtually powerless. Mustafa Khamenei is alive, by the looks of it at least, but he has not come out in the open. He probably needs some major operations, surgeries, whatever. I have no idea about that. This is only going by open source. Therefore, you have now 31 warlords equal to 31 districts of Iran who are running the country. If one odd district falls, for example, that means you can create some sort of a disturbance in this power structure there. If that happens, probably some people may come out, and this is what the Americans are counting on, that there will be some internal revolt, because you would have inflation. Today inflation is running at 47%. Today unemployment, well, I'm not sure what rate it would be. The last reported number was 20%. Right. With currency collapse, this inflation will rise. There would be more problems. People will then start thinking, do I survive today or does the country survive? You might have a situation like it happened in January when people came out, and if this time people come out, there is a possibility that the IRGC may fall.
So the plausible scenario, which you are painting is in my mind plausible, but the chances of it happening are remote. I'll tell you the reason why. Because based on the ministrations of the US administration, when the Iranians were asked to now revolt against the current regime, right? Some of them did. And what was the result? We've all
45,000 killed.
45,000 people killed, right? So, and though the Americans have come out, actually it was quite surprising that they made admission that CIA and the Israelis had actually flown in arms and armed a certain component But that component never really took up the arms against the IRGC because they felt maybe they were weak or maybe they just absorbed the arms for a later day or to be used on a particular time.
Correct.
So here, one of the plausible scenarios, just one like I told you, but I think personally I feel that it is the chances of it panning out are less because of what has happened in the recent past. The chances of actually doing the naval blockade, because remember that currently as we speak, there is a 2-week ceasefire in place. Out of that 2-week ceasefire which is in place, 1 week has kind of passed. A week is left. As the Americans now effect this particular naval blockade, they will have certain naval elements operating in the Strait of Hormuz. What happens tomorrow if those elements operating in the Strait of Hormuz to effect this blockade are targeted by the Iranians? Scenario which can happen because
Absolutely.
they are trigger happy, number one. Number two, the Houthis start playing up on the Red Sea side, right, in which the problem now becomes a little more complicated.
Absolutely.
So to my mind, that this, in terms of scenarios which are likely to be, which are likely to actually pan out in the near future, and I hope I'm wrong, it is, I personally feel it's just a question of time. In the next 24 to 48 hours, I'm sticking my neck out by putting out a deadline, you will find that the Houthis, maybe on their own, and maybe because of ministrations from the Iranian regime, right, will now start playing a more proactive role in actually impacting the movement of merchant vessels in the Red Sea.
Manu, I hope you are wrong.
I hope I'm wrong.
I pray you are wrong.
Correct?
But I'm not too sure you are wrong. Because I do feel this conflict will expand, and it will expand to the Bab el-Mandab. It probably will engulf the world even before it gets resolved in some form or the other. What is surprising, what is sad, is the one person or one set of people who are most affected, the Iranians themselves, have no say in this matter.
But one aspect of the Iranians which we are not really factoring in is their resolve and resolution, their resilience,
Yes.
because they've been facing adversity, right, for such a long time.
Oh yes, they've been under sanctions from 1979 or 1980 onwards.
Sanctions and hostile action by various
absolutely.
by various countries. So that country today, in my understanding, has the capacity to bear pain, or has a better capacity to bear pain as compared to the rest of the world, which is also being today impacted adversely. So that's the point which I'm trying to put across.
Absolutely correct. There is no doubt on that count totally. Because let's face it, Iran is a civilization. It's a civilization that is a few thousand years old. The people have survived. They have lived through various types of onslaughts. And in the world, they are among the oldest civilizations. Okay, a civilizational power does not vanish just by itself. It needs a lot more than just a few sanctions or a few blockades or a few bombs here and there. Right? So let's move on now.
Absolutely.
Let's get on to India.
Absolutely.
See, scenario painting, we painted one dramatically brilliant scenario. Iran falls or the IRGC falls, things get well, everything is back to normal. Everyone says very happy, very happy.
It won't happen.
It probably will not
With
happen.
the naval blockade, with the air component only being employed against the Iranians, IRGC is not falling, Iranians are not falling. Anybody harboring that hope is actually, is not a realist. Is how I
The darker scenario is it getting broader.
Correct.
The Houthis come into the picture, Bab el-Mandab happen.
Correct.
Truth will probably be somewhere in between.
And here I'll just request you that before you actually we kind of focus back onto India and how we're getting impacted, there's also a need to see what are the Israelis up to during this particular point in time, because the Israelis are hammering the Lebanese, the Hezbollah and the Lebanese elements, south of the Litani River. And because this was supposed to be a part of the ceasefire, so the ceasefire between the US and the Iranians is holding, but the ceasefire aspect, which was supposed to actually overlap between the Israelis and the Hezbollah part, is not being respected by the Israelis.
Well, I'm not too sure if Israel was ever a part of the ceasefire. That part came only in the draft which Iran wanted, but was not agreed to by the US.
Fair enough.
So it was not a part of it. Israel has See, when you talk about Iran and being a civilizational power and being under tremendous pressure, existential, Israel has the same existential crisis with respect to Hezbollah. It is doing what it does.
The only point which I'd like to put across is that tomorrow, suppose, just before the start of the ceasefire, the Israelis carried out very heavy bombing of about 300 odd targets in Beirut, killing killing a large number of people.
That's correct.
Since then, they have not actually attacked Beirut, but they are engaging other military targets, right? South of the Litani River, basically by their land forces which are operating there, an infantry division operating there. The point which I am trying to put across is that as Israelis hammer the Hezbollah, Iran cannot afford to sit on the sidelines and watch a very critical ally of theirs, get hit by the Israelis and they're not reacting. So what will happen tomorrow, or can happen within this 1 week period, is that if the Iranians again launch their missiles toward Israelis, technically the entire ceasefire which we're talking about, this 1 week period, right? It will again get disturbed, which will again have its own set of ramifications.
Absolutely.
So the joker in the pack, if I make, no country should be called a joker, or labeled as a joker, but the joker in the pack is the Israelis whose offensive actions, right, will cause a certain amount of disruption into whatever scenario building we are doing. Is how I'd like to put it.
That is correct. That is correct. Because see, right now we are only doing US, Iran, and Straits of Hormuz.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Israel is still not in the picture.
Absolutely.
Israel, you cannot have. See, the first step itself in the ceasefire without Israel was a non-starter. It is the major component of this major belligerent here. And if you ignore Israel, you are not going anywhere.
And another very interesting side dialogue has kind of opened up on the social media, where yesterday the US President and the Vice President have said that failure to reach an agreement on the refinement process of the nuclear materials, in Iran, has actually what has led to the collapse of the ceasefire talks. Correct? So now there are people all over the world who are saying that if this is what is the actual reason for the collapse of the talks, then why should not Iran tomorrow actually come out and say that the Israeli nuclear enrichment plans should also form a part of this? Because if you feel that Iranian enrichment will cause destabilization in this region, right, the Iranians have a right to say that what the Israelis are doing, which is supposed to be a covert nuclear power, and they are carrying out in their enrichment without any kind of this thing. Why not open up? Why not have a level playing field? So what I'm saying is, the world which never ever I could never have, because I've been following this Iranian JCPOA talks with the US for a very, very long time. Nobody has ever tried to actually link up the two nuclear programs of Iran and Israel. But today, the world, because US has gone it alone without taking all allies on board, they have gone and attacked Iran. So very many more questions are being raised.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting.
It is correct. See, there are too many wheels within wheels. If you think of start going out here, you have various other factions. Even the GCC countries are not united. You have the UAE fighting Saudis. There is the fear of what happens after the oil, once oil finishes off, which is why the fight between Dubai and Neom, the new city. So all these things are there. There are wheels within these wheels. And how they will play out is only time will tell.
Absolutely.
The cauldron has been stirred and has been stirred.
It has been stirred, and
violently at that.
And let's see how it kind of settles down and how can the
Correct.
flames be put out, because the one is stirring of the elements within the cauldron, or how can the fire under the cauldron be put out, right? So that's what we're discussing, and let's now move on to the impact on India.
India itself.
Absolutely.
So let's get on to India.
Okay.
What has India done? Among the first things India did was to ensure its population did not suffer. So what did they do? Petrol prices were frozen, no rise in the petrol prices. However, they rose the prices of premium petrol. So that rich people can afford. Okay? LPG. Domestic 100%, in fact, We had placed an order for an LPG last week, it has come. Nothing, no follow-up, nothing, it's come on its own. No trouble. So LPG is coming. The problem remains CNG. With LPG
So here
by
on the
itself,
LPG, I have a slightly different point of view. We who are middle class and above, right, and are comfortably placed, we find that the disruption has been minimal because we are also, some of us are holding, maybe a cylinder or a double cylinder connection or whatever, and we can also afford to pay a little extra to get a cylinder. The queues which are forming all over India and they are coming up on social media, right? They can't be wished away. Whether you would like to actually factor them in, we have seen that a huge number of migrants, both from Gujarat, from the NCR region, from other places, eateries. So there has been an impact of LPG. There has been an...
See, that's the commercial LPG.
Commercial LPG.
I'm coming down to that.
Correct. No, so domestic LPG and commercial LPG, there has been an adverse impact. The government
yes.
has definitely gone on to a war footing to be able to contain this. And unlike the COVID times, right? So this has actually been, I would say, better managed than the shortage.
There is a shortage.
Absolutely.
You cannot wish away.
Absolutely.
And you can't get 100% everything. Now let's be clear on that.
So when I was trying to read up on this, actually, today in India we have about 33 crore, that is 330 million LPG connections. So in the major metros and major cities, the disruption has been comparatively less. As a matter of fact, from 28th February when this entire thing started, the government has also invoked the ESMA, the Essential Commodities
Maintenance of Essential Commodities Act.
So now, because of that invocation, right, black marketing, they are trying to check people from actually hoarding and indulging in black marketing. That is one aspect. I was quite pleasantly surprised also to read that almost 500,000 connections of PNG, right, with the LPG have actually got sanctioned in just 30 days. So the government has been pushing for the promotion
of PNG.
Correct. Right? Because PNG, why PNG? Because PNG is domestically produced. We are actually...
we have excess in PNG, we are not being consumed.
Yeah, but
we have to burn it.
Absolutely. So that is one issue where the government is again trying to be proactive to kind of, take care of this particular situation. But also, again, these reports, you have to take them with a pinch of salt. Gas cylinders in the rural areas, the Ujjwala, the scheme of the government has got adversely impacted, and people have been forced to pay almost 2,000 to 3,000 rupees per cylinder.
Manu, you're right and wrong.
Okay.
You're right because that is true. People have paid more. There is no doubt about it. You're wrong because it happened in the first few days where everybody went into panic buying. After the panic buying was over, everything else settled down, it is no longer as true because I have been speaking to some of my relatives and friends in UP, especially in the rural side, and they are saying it is freely available.
I totally agree with you.
No problem on that.
This feedback is not uniform across the country. Like I told you, certain pockets have been...
Well, even in Telangana, I have spoken to somebody in...
No, here we find our help, etc., who are working in our homes, today are saying that we are getting the gas, but maybe, we have to pay a little extra for whatever is required. So you are right that this crisis, the government has put its right foot forward and has tried very hard to manage this. That part is well taken.
Right. Where we have a problem is with respect to LNG and CNG.
Correct.
LPG, the other thing is, don't forget, LPG is a part of the oil refining process. If India has oil refineries and they are working at their full capacity, in fact they are working at 110% capacity at an average, obviously LPG is coming and they have all been optimized to give you more and more LPG. LPG should not be a problem as we go forward.
So just to put it into perspective, today we have about 23 refineries in the country, right? And these 23 refineries are working overtime, like you said. The government's policies, if I'm correct, today itself the government has imposed a huge amount of excise duty on OMCs which were actually supplying diesel and ATF abroad. Otherwise we were charging about $30 odd. If I have the figures, I'll just come back to that a little later. But the government has almost raised the import duties by about 3 times.
Export duties.
Export duties.
That's absolutely correct.
So as to
cross subsidize.
Not cross subsidize to disincentivize the export of these items so that the domestic availability remains.
See, I think it is more to do with cross subsidization because oil OMCs are bleeding because of not being able to get the full remuneration for the oil because oil prices have gone up, right? And you can't increase the price of petrol and diesel, so you have a problem in your hands. So there you have done that and said, okay, fine, we will increase the price of whatever is going out.
The moment the price of oil goes beyond $100, then the OMC start losing about 5 odd rupees plus minus on diesel per litre, and they start losing about rupees 4 plus minus again on petrol.
Correct.
Right? So now this to make sure that the OMCs don't suffer, the government has cut excise duty by about 10 rupees per litre, which was done as a policy measure.
Correct.
Basically so that the balance sheet of the OMCs remains healthy.
Correct.
Right? So that is also one aspect which has been done.
Okay, so let's look at the refining, India's refining capacity.
Okay.
Broadly, you said we have 23 refineries, which is correct.
Absolutely.
Approximately 11 million barrels per day is our refining capacity.
Correct.
Our consumption is 5.5 million barrels.
Correct.
We are the world's 5th largest exporter of petroleum products.
Correct.
Our products go to US, aviation fuel, to Europe, again aviation fuel, petrol, diesel, and to so many other countries.
Absolutely.
Therefore, if we put in a little extra money out there, because our input costs are higher, the other country will pay, we are only passing on the cost there. So we have one advantage here because of our greater refining ability. And don't forget, 4 refineries of Russia have been hit by Ukraine. They are already, some of them have been shut, some are at reduced capacities. Russia, with effect from 1st of April, has stopped exports of all petroleum products. So we will export oil, crude oil that is. We'll export gas, but we are not exporting petroleum products. Second,
can we take it one by one? Just at this particular point, you are absolutely right. It's a chicken and egg situation. For the oil refineries to refine those 5.5 million barrels per day which you're talking about, you need crude oil. But that crude oil today is not coming.
It's coming.
No, again, we'll just come to that, the specifics a little later. Today in the country, our strategic reserves are only about equivalent to about 9.5 to 10 days worth available with us in the country. They are distributed at 3 different places, 2 in Karnataka and 1 in Andhra. Vizag, Mangalore, and a place called Padur in Karnataka. Correct. And there's a 4th facility which is partly been made, but I do not know whether it has really been filled up in Odisha. Right? So there are these 4 facilities existing. Again, the issue is of the movement of the crude oil from these strategic oil storage facilities down to the refineries, because all of them are not co-located. So that is one issue. The second issue is that during this intervening month, I think we had almost about 9 large crude carriers coming down to India in this intervening last 30 to 40 days. That's what the statistics say, that about 9 odd large crude carriers have come in.
That is from the Gulf.
From the Gulf.
From the Gulf.
From the Gulf, because today the bulk of the LPG and the crude actually is coming down from the Gulf countries itself. So there are issues. So it is when we start talking about the refining capacity, it exists. But for this refining capacity to actually be able to produce fully, it must be able to get that crude coming into the country regularly, which is now at the moment disrupted, and now with this naval blockade, definitely more impacted.
See, that is oil that was coming from the Gulf was 70% plus a year plus back. It is now less than 30%. We have already diversified. 8 lakh barrels per day is coming from Venezuela, which is almost all of Venezuelan production. Because India is the only country which can refine Venezuelan crude. We were getting about 2 million barrels per day from Russia, came down to about 1.4. We are now back to about 3.5, 4 million barrels from Russia. India has virtually waylaid at least 3 large tankers that were going to China. They were detoured and they came into India. This is happening, and Russia has already promised that they will jack up the input from 4 million barrels per day, now that the sanctions are off, to 6, 6.5, 7. When the Deputy Prime Minister came here, this is the discussions that happened. They've also given you a carta blanca as far as gas is concerned. We've got treaties or deals done with Angola, with Brazil, with Algeria for oil. That's all coming in. Guyana in a big way. We're going to get gas from Australia and Canada. US has become our second largest gas supplier today. That's the state as far as gas is concerned. So yes, we have been diversifying.
So while the places from where you're going to be picking up oil and gas are tied up, the quantum of logistics involved, whether we are picking up oil and gas from Latin America, Venezuela, or from the US or from Canada, and now that particular loads coming down to India, right? Normally would take about maybe 2 to 3 weeks of passage.
It takes about 3 weeks of
about
passage.
3 weeks of passage, from the and bulk of the the Americans today are in a very happy situation. Like we just mentioned to you, that we are, I think, about 23 odd refineries. Americans are about at 130 plus refineries. Bulk of the refineries are on the west coast, right? And as a matter of fact, they are today in a position ready to be able to supply to the world. Should the world be able to come
That's
and
what that's what Trump is saying.
He says, come.
I've got
all the world.
I have more oil supplies than the second and third put together.
And so where we are slightly better off is that because we had 9.5 days of crude, luckily last year the government of India implemented a very, very important policy decision. We started blending our petrol with 20% ethanol. Correct? So now what has happened is, actually technically, our quantum of petrol required, because blending is taking place only for petrol and not for any other ATF or diesel.
That's correct.
Right? So this 20% ethanol blending actually is also helping us out during this particular crisis, because it actually means that you have 20% fuel extra available, right? So from 10%, this move to 20% has been brilliant, and it is also now in this crisis situation, it is helping us out. And obviously it's also at the macro level in the country, it's also an impetus. It's helping the farmers because you're picking up the molasses to make ethanol from them. So to that extent, we have taken certain good steps to weather the storm. But now that this entire thing is going to be, movement of oil and gas from the Gulf region is going to be cut because of naval blockade, we are going to be facing huge issues. I'll come to that a little later.
Manu, my view is the world will ensure we get oil because they need refining. It will be more.
So what you say may well pan out, but till now, when you say the world will make it happen, the world is not involved. The country which is involved is the US. And the US...
See, US involvement, where is the problem area? Let's face it. It's the Gulf and Bab el Mandab. As far as you are concerned, when you get oil from Russia, it is coming from Vladivostok, Chennai route. No Bab el Mandab involved. You get from Venezuela, from Brazil, from Guyana, it's all coming from Cape of Good Hope. No involvement of that side. So I am not seeing major issues as far as oil input as far as India is concerned. Okay. I do feel that we will get enough oil and we have been making on the spot. Virtually they say most of Iranian oil which is lying on ships has been bought by India. A lot of Russian ships are coming to India, and these are all contracts which are signed in the month of March to be implemented in the month of April.
So I'm just quoting some data which is, I just jotted down from an authoritative source. It says, as we speak now, 22 Indian ships, crude carriers primarily, are stranded in the Strait of Hormuz. They are there, waiting to be filled up so that they can get oil back. But because of this naval blockade, it will not happen as we see it in the near future.
That's correct.
That's point number
In
one.
fact, that is one thing which is troubling Iran the most.
Correct.
Because Iran has storage capacity which is about 60% full. They are pumping out 1.5 million barrels per day. For that 40% to fill up, they have ability for 13 days only. After those 13 days are done, they will have to cap the oil wells. If they cap the oil wells, then it's going to be frightfully expensive to bring them back online. It will take a month, it will take a lot more expenditure.
And there's a very interesting policy decision which I mentioned earlier. I was not getting the figures right, I got them here. The Indian government has exponentially hiked the export duty on diesel and ATF. So what they've done is, the export duty on diesel, which was about $37 per barrel, has been hiked to $95. That means almost an increase of 200% plus. On ATF, which was earlier $50 per barrel, it has now been hiked to $72 per barrel. So the OMCs in India, the total of 23, there are OMCs which are looking after they are producing for the domestic market, and there are OMCs which are now actually located in certain SEZs which are meant for export.
Correct.
Now this particular duty, very interestingly, okay, this is just an aside, this particular duty has been applied to all the OMCs which are manufacturing for India, meaning that the amount of diesel and ATF they are making or churning out, the government does not want it to be exported, so they have levied very, very high export duties on them. But the Reliance refinery, for example, in Jamnagar, because it is located in the SEZ of Jamnagar, will continue exporting diesel and ATF at the previous rates. So now there's a mismatch coming into the revenue of the OMCs within India. That's the point which I'm trying to...
Absolutely correct. But Manu, please understand, if the OMCs which are designed to make it produce for India alone started making more money by exporting it, they will not supply to India. So they have to be disincentivized.
Yeah.
That's what has happened.
What is happening is absolutely correct. We are getting back to the same point today, that both the OMCs which are for the domestic market or for exports can only actually refine provided the crude starts coming in. And we are now talking about crude disruptions taking place because of logistics involved. From where
I'm not too sure about crude disruptions, Manu.
There is no
there is no shortage of crude which is coming into India.
There is what I'm trying to say is there is opaqueness on this, because we don't have the data. We don't have actually
nobody will give you the data.
No, we don't have it.
Nobody will give you this data.
Yeah, but the sense which you are getting is that this disruption is actually a cause for worry for the Indian government, and that is the reason. Okay. That is the reason why our External Affairs Minister and the Petroleum Minister has been engaging with Gulf countries. But engagement with them, they may give you certain things on priority. And secondly, crude is not the only thing which is of cause of concern to us. The second part is fertilizers. 40% of the requirement of fertilizers for India comes from Gulf countries.
That's correct.
We are now
100% of helium comes from there.
We are just
65% of cooking coal comes from there.
We are just 2 months away. We are just 2 months away, right, before the monsoon comes and hits India. And after the harvesting of wheat up and north, planting of rice has to take place. So there the requirement of fertilizers, right, again gets very, very adversely impacted. So these are the two issues which I thought I'll flag. We need to study a little more on this.
You are correct. I was just reading the statement given by the fertilizer minister, and who very clearly said that as far as the current season is concerned, that is when it happens after the rice comes in, we have enough fertilizer in the country. There is no shortage of fertilizer. For the next year, by then we will make up whatever is required.
Here again, because
we can always.
I'm not going by PIB inputs. I'm not going by the Government of India inputs. I'm going by social media inputs. Last year, actually, you'll be surprised that for a bag of DAP, a nitrogen-based fertilizer, which is required in the fields, the government again has been saying that there is no shortage. But what has the government actually done? The bag, which used to weigh an X number of kgs earlier, the volume of the bags have been cut down. So technically, I can say, so many bags per district were being supplied previously. I'm supplying the same.
That many bags.
Same thing is happening in certain areas on the gas cylinders. A gas cylinder is supposed to be weighing 14.5 kgs, a normal gas cylinder. The new ones which have been introduced in the market are weighing only about 10 kgs or plus minus.
No, there is a 5 kg cylinder.
5 kg cylinder also. So the point which I'm trying to say is that these are tough times. So we have to have mitigating circumstances, but in a very large subcontinental sized economy, where 55 to 60% today, sir, just to put it into perspective, I'll just give you some figures which will actually startle you. The Iranian economy has only 6 to 7% people involved in the agriculture sector, right? Out of a population of about 90 million, only about 7%. That makes it about 6 to 7 million people are involved in agriculture. In a country of 1.4 billion, in which 55 to 60% people are involved in agriculture, right? And the farmers are having very, very small land holdings. Each chap has to line up, whether I have 1 acre of land or 3 acres of land, I have to line up to get a quantity of fertilizers, right? So the point which I am trying to put across is that yes, at the macro level, everything seems to be hunky-dory, but when it comes down to logistics and when you understand as to how petrochemicals and their derivatives actually go into the society, right, there are issues. And, and the government is very, very proactive and very sensitive to these needs. So the measures being adopted by the government of India are excellent, but what we are trying to put across is that we need to double down on these figures. We need to double down on the effort being put in to manage this, because just by saying that a problem is at the macro level, we are well placed for the future supply of hydrocarbons, right? It is not the future supply of hydrocarbons, sir. I can assure you that tomorrow, if the government of India is forced to, we have not gone into the financial aspects of this. As a matter of fact, it says that there are certain studies which have been done, for every $1 rise in the price of crude oil, right? The country has to pay something almost about 15 to 16,000 crore rupees annually for $1 rise.
That's true.
And keep it in mind that in the past 2 to 3 months, the price of the petroleum products have risen by about $30 to $35. It can actually have an impact. They say for every $10 rise in the price of crude, a country like India's GDP, of the size of India, its GDP gets shaved off by about 0.5%. So just to, I don't want to get into current account deficits and other areas, but it would be sufficient to note that if we are going to have a sustained $30, that means prices which were in the range of $60 to $70 exist at $100 and more, our GDP growth for this current year is likely to be shaved off by about up to 1.5%.
That is true. It is expected to be shaved off by that.
So that's the reason why what we are trying to do is that this particular impact of what is happening in the Gulf will have certain short-term implications, some mid-term implications, and some long-term implications, which are going to actually influence every facet of life in the Indian economy, starting off from your kitchens to the vehicles which we drive,
including your toilet cleaner, because that comes from sulfur, and that is sulfur is not coming.
Everything.
Absolutely, there is no doubt.
So I thought that maybe today, just because today we are just talking for the first time, and we'll take a deep dive into the various sectors a little later, it would be good to flag these issues, because I find that even on the mainstream media, not too much of coverage on these aspects.
That is true. What is even more interesting is when you're talking about long term, just think of, I'm not trying to say that India is doing everything brilliantly. No, it is not. I'm not saying that we are best placed. We are very well placed. I'm saying we are, in these circumstances, we are probably the best placed.
I think we're doing a brilliant job.
We may be, but
we are doing a brilliant job, but despite that, hardships are around the corner. Is the point which I'm trying to put across.
Hardships are not going anywhere. Let's face it. You and me have stood in lines for ration, for kerosene, for sugar, and there were those days. We've seen those days where lines were there for everything. Today, we are in a much better situation, but tomorrow may be even well better. Why? Because just think of it. What is India doing as a country? We are trying to say, let us reduce dependence on fossil fuels, increase dependence on renewables.
Absolutely.
In the year 2025, for the first time ever, India generated more electricity from renewables than fossil fuels. You go by numbers, Out of 500 gigawatts of power that were generated, 256 came from renewables and 244 came from fossil fuels.
We've done a wonderful job.
Done a damn good job there.
In the renewables, not only in renewables, even in nuclear energy, our fast breeder reactor now going, critical at Kalpakkam, right?
Stage 2
stage 2 has gone the same.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, as we go forward, we will be in a position to make use of the very large quantities of thorium which are available in monazite sands across India. Please understand this. Here today, we are trying to just take a snapshot and actually try to understand the various facets. So it is true, the impact on India and various facets of Indian economy are too big topic to really be covered.
See, we can't do it in half an hour. We can't do it in half an hour. It'll take days to do it.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to try to put down and crush the whole thing to very small, interesting tidbits only.
Absolutely.
Our solar focus is there.
Correct.
Right. Nuclear, you said the Shanti Act came in only to allow small and medium reactors, SMRs to have, not medium but modular reactors to come in. We are planning to increase our nuclear energy generation from just under 8 gigawatts today to 100 gigawatts by 2047. So that's a big leap forward.
Absolutely.
We want to become net carbon zero by 2070.
Correct.
We aim to get 50% by 2030. We already hit 50% in 2026. So we are doing better than expected.
We are doing great things. I'll just like to give you an example. I travel very often. I travel by trains. So maybe twice a month. One aspect which really actually strikes me when I am moving around the country is that the electrification undertaken by the Indian Railways, which has actually cut out about 90 to 95% of the dependency on diesels for the largest organization in the country, and we have gone totally electric. So there are a lot of good government initiatives which are in place, which are actually panning out, and today because of that, at least the vitals of the economy in terms of infrastructure, at least the movement of goods and materials across the country will continue despite shortages staring us in the face.
Absolutely. Just think of, there was an IT Delhi study, if you will, some years back, which said we lose about 1.5% of our GDP just by trucks standing in octroys and checkposts and pathetic roads.
Absolutely.
Look at the roads today.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Strategically, if you have to look at what should we do next, my personal view is, you are talking about strategic reserves. I think it should rise to 240 days in due course of time. It will not happen in one day.
True.
It will take years to do it.
True.
Maybe multiple 5-year plans.
True.
But you have to get to that.
Correct.
Right. You have to diversify and get even more aggressive in the diversification of your electricals, of your sources of energy.
Absolutely.
Which means electricity should come from different sources.
Absolutely.
You have green hydrogen, a 20,000 crore initiative that has happened, and you have the first train by green hydrogen already running on trial basis, right? A 20,000 crore for the nuclear itself, in that Nuclear Enablement Act, or whatever initiative that is called, is happening there. Okay. India had stopped prospecting for oil. For many years we were doing nothing. Bombay High, the Krishna Godavari basin, they were there, we were extracting and were very happy with what it was. Now there's a renewed focus there. Andamans has been a find and they claim it is as big as Guyana. Oil has been struck in Uttar Pradesh, in Balia.
You are the naval expert. What's happened in India is Bombay High, for example, we struck oil and gas at about 300, 400 meters. Approximately. In the Godavari basin, where Reliance has been drilling now for quite some time, and ONGC has also been prospecting. We are now prospecting at a depth of about 3,000 meters plus. So, like when the US President says drill baby drill, in India we need to drill deep baby, drill very deep in our oceans.
And Andaman is also 3,000 meters.
Correct. So now the problem is we will have to have the capacities and the capabilities to actually be able to drill down to the depths of 3,000 meters, extract whatever needs to be extracted, and then transport it from Andamans or wherever to the mainland, right? So today technology gives you those options.
Absolutely.
Gives you those options, but they are very expensive options, and we need to become a market leader in that area.
Which is interesting is a company like ONGC has already put some 10,000 odd crores into just acquisition of oil rigs and the correct jigs, etc., for drilling in the Andamans. And this is proactively without the government
But
coming
Jack, we
into
need to
it.
be frank. I've been studying this energy, what shall I say, dynamics for the last about 20 years. Number of governments have come and gone during this 20-year period. Everybody had an oil exploration policy. Blocks were being sanctioned, and
Nothing really happened.
Nothing for last 20 years. We heard of this drama, if I may use the word, actually happening time and again. Auctioning taking place, investors coming in, but we never found that in the last 20-25 years money actually getting down committed on ground to explore, because buying a section of the sea during an auction is a different thing than putting actually resources there to be able to do. So the point which I'm trying to put across is that we need to give it much more serious attention than the lip service which has been given in the past, if we are going to increase, because our problem is that the requirement of a country like India, which is now on verge of becoming the fourth or the third largest economic power, fuel will be required in great quantities. We are almost importing about 80% of our fuel needs, oil, hydrocarbon needs. Now, though we are going in for the renewables and alternative sources, right? Those in the energy basket, you will always like to have a mix. You will never like to actually put all your eggs into one basket. Europe today is crying. Germany today is crying. Why are they crying today? Because now with the oil and gas cut off from Russia, no nuclear energy being generated in Germany, right? Because they took a decision some years back, 20 years back, to say we will not go in for nuclear energy, right? So today they're stuck for power. So actually when you start studying the energy sector, you realize that in the bouquet of the energy basket, it is always good to have alternatives, and there is no one size fit all for all regions. In India, there are regions. We are blessed in Rajasthan, for example, vast expanses of land are available, sunlight is available. The same may not be true in a place like Andamans, for example, because of the green cover, etc. available. The solar development may not be as effective till the time you decide to actually now put solar panels into the sea. As a matter of fact, very interesting read that the largest floating solar water panel happens to be right here, very close to where we stay in Andhra, in a place called Ravangundam, right? They have the largest floating solar panels on water, right? Created, and they're doing a wonderful job. But that is not in the sea. That is in a catchment area, So it's interesting. But the point which I'm trying to put across is that we need to also explore energy alternatives, which we could.
That's exactly what is happening. See, green hydrogen, brown hydrogen, you have getting into not just energy sources, you need storage. The sodium ion batteries, for example, which is a next big thing that might happen going from where we are. So those are the aspects that are there.
So the Indian Railways under with the initiative from the Transport Minister, from Mr. Gadkari, hydrogen has been given a lot of attention, and that's an area we need to work on. Like you said, it's again a difficult entity to very, very mercurial in nature. So it's handling, transportation, utilization, etc. A lot of safety issues do get involved, and they're evolving. And now with technology coming up, as a matter of fact, even the Japanese automakers are betting very big on hydrogen. On hydrogen, vis-a-vis the EV this thing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So then let's try and sum up the entire thing. If I had to put it in very quick, small bits, as far as the blockade is concerned, it is a major issue. You are trying to fight fire with another fire. And there is Iran, which is going to suffer even more, much more than the world will. Yet question mark remains whether it will survive. as what it is. Will IRGC as a regime survive? Iran will, I am sure. But will IRGC survive? That's a question mark. How much it will expand into from the Gulf into the Bab el-Mandab and move on to become engulfing the entire world is only time will tell. That's one part. The second part is how is India coping up with it. In that we did speak about the fact that yes, India is a major refining power. We did say that India is finding alternate sources to oil, especially trying to bypass the Gulf and the Bab el-Mandab if that comes to the thing. And in case we have to have energy security, which is mandatory for us, we have to find alternate sources of energy. And in those alternate sources of energy, the renewables, the green hydrogen, the nuclear, many other new things which will come up as we go along. Especially most promising is the fast breeder, the thorium thing, the small and modular reactors, green hydrogen, they all look very promising. Your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, when in a crisis, what do human beings do? And here I'm not talking about US, Iran, I'm just talking about...
They innovate.
They?
Innovate.
Yes, so the choices are either they innovate or they double down, right? Unfortunately, my understanding, and I hope this is taking a pun at we are now out of uniform, but in uniform fraternity, normally people double down. Innovation doesn't come very easily to minds which have been educated in a particular thought processes. So my issues, the point which I'm trying to put across is, my fear is that in the current escalating situation, if Iran decides to double down on what it is doing, and the Americans feel that there is no other alternative but to cause them more military punishment, right? During the blockade and during this 1 week ceasefire, if it endures, any small situation can easily spiral out of control, and which will make both the sides harden their positions. What the world today requires at this particular point in time, and about that I'm very, very clear, right, is not more fighting. It is an end to fighting, to sit down across the table, to let sanity prevail, so that not only do these guys sort out their differences, but also the world at large can carry on with what we are supposed to be doing, right? So now that's why I said this is, it's more of a psychological reasoning, but I see both sides doubling down in the near future.
Well, let's see what happens. Time will tell.
So with that, I thought we need to wrap up this particular episode, and then let's hope, pray for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Absolutely. So, my dear friends, this was a great conversation I had with my dear coursemate, MJS Kahlon, Lieutenant General Kahlon, and we put across various aspects, various thought processes, sometimes at totally divergent views, but the fact is the world is changing. If the world changes, we have to change. He talks about doubling down, I'm talking about innovation, and I have great faith in Indian ability to innovate, because I do believe we will innovate faster than anybody else does. Until our next episode, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, Namaskar.
Jai Hind ji, thank you.